I need to read the skill file and check the names to avoid, then write the story. The names to avoid: Nathan, Derek, Marcus, Renee. Now let me write the story directly in chat. I didn't panic. That's the part nobody believes when I tell this story. They always expect me to say I screamed, or cried, or froze. But when I opened my eyes and saw nothing but white, snow on every window, snow on the roof, snow bearing the porch steps, the first thing I felt was something closer to clarity, like my body already knew what my mind hadn't caught up to yet. Let me back up. My brother's name is Liam. He's 4 years older than me, 34 now, and for most of my life, I thought he was a person I could count on when everything else fell apart. Our parents divorced when I was 9. Our dad moved to Phoenix and started a second family we were never really invited into. So it was just me and Liam and our mom in a 2-bedroom apartment in Cleveland, and we held each other together through all of it. The lean years, the community college applications, the nights she worked double shifts and we ate cereal for dinner and pretended it was fine. I would have done anything for him. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest. Our mom passed away 18 months ago, pancreatic cancer. Diagnosis to death in 11 weeks. That's how fast it moves. She was 61 years old and she died on the Thursday morning in October, while I was sitting next to her hospital bed holding her hand, and Liam was in the parking garage taking a call from his wife. Her name is Carla, Liam's wife. They've been married 6 years. She's polished in the way that makes you feel slightly underdressed, just standing next to her, always put together, always smiling, just a beat too wide. I never had a specific reason not to trust her. I just noticed things. Small things. The way she'd go quiet when my mom talked about her savings. The way she'd change the subject when inheritance came up. The way she'd look at Liam, not with love exactly, more like a signal. Like they had a channel only they could tune into. My mom left a will. She'd worked with a lawyer 18 months before she got sick, which in hindsight maybe she sensed something coming, or maybe she was just practical. The house was paid off. A small 3-bedroom in Parma she'd bought in 2009 when the market crashed and the price was low enough for a single mother with a good credit score to manage. She left it to both of us, split down the middle, with a clause that neither of us could force a sale without the other's written consent. Liam congratulated me when the lawyer read it. He hugged me outside the office. He said, "She always wanted to make sure you were taken care of." I didn't think anything of it then. The invitation came about 4 months later, March. He texted me on a Tuesday night and said he'd rented a cabin up near Lake Erie for a long weekend. Him, Carla, and me. Said we needed it. Said we'd been so in our heads since Mom died, so locked into grief and logistics, that we hadn't just been brothers in a long time. He said the word family twice in one paragraph. I almost said no. I had a project deadline at work and my car needed new tires, and I was in that phase of grief where going outside felt like a strange amount of effort. But Liam called me the next morning. Actually called, not texted. And he said, "Come on, she would have wanted us to do this." I said yes. The drive up was normal. We stopped at a gas station outside Sandusky and Liam bought coffee and one of those terrible hot dogs that had been rotating since dawn, and we laughed about it. And for about 40 minutes on I-90, it felt like we were 20 again, driving nowhere specific, just talking. He asked about work. I asked about their new apartment. Carla was in the back seat on her phone most of the ride, but that wasn't unusual for her. The cabin was nice. Nicer than I expected. 2 stories, a wood-burning fireplace, a back porch that looked out over a frozen field stretching toward the tree line. There was a hot tub Liam said was already heated. There were bottles of wine on the kitchen counter and groceries already stocked, which meant they planned this carefully, which I noted and then set aside. That first night was easy. We made pasta. We opened wine. We sat by the fire and Liam told an old story about the time our dad took us fishing and neither of us caught anything, and he drove back in total silence while we tried not to laugh. I hadn't heard that story in years. I missed my brother sitting there. I missed who I thought he was. I went to bed around 11. When I woke up, I didn't know what time it was. The room was dark and the quality of the silence was different. Not quiet cabin in the woods silence, but sealed silence. The kind where nothing outside is moving at all. I reached for my phone. No signal. Which happened up there, I knew that. I dropped to 1 bar on the drive-in. But the phone also said 7:42 a.m. and there was no smell of coffee. No sound of Carla's morning news habit, nothing. I went to the door of my room and opened it. The cabin was empty. I don't mean they'd stepped outside. I mean, their bags were gone. The wine glasses from the night before had been rinsed and set in the drying rack. The groceries that were left over had been put away. Someone had folded the blanket on the couch. They looked like a rental property that had just been turned over, cleaned, and reset for the next guests. Except I was still in it. I went to the front door and turned the handle. It opened. It wasn't locked from outside. Nothing dramatic like that. But when I stepped onto the porch, I understood immediately what the sealed silence meant. It had snowed overnight. Heavily. There were maybe 14, 15 inches on the ground, still coming down in thick, steady flakes. And the driveway, the long gravel driveway that was the only way in or out, was buried completely. My car was buried. The car Liam had driven was not there. They had left, in the night, before the worst of the snow, while I was sleeping. I stood on the porch in my socks and a sweatshirt, and I just looked at it for a moment. Then I went back inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and I thought about it the way you think about a math problem. Not emotionally, just what is the actual situation and what are the actual options. I found the note on the kitchen counter under the coffee maker. I almost missed it because it was folded small, the size of a matchbook almost, tucked under the corner. My name was written on the outside in Carla's handwriting. Inside it said, "We need you to understand that this is better for everyone. By the time you read this, everything will already be in motion. Don't fight it, Owen. It'll be easier if you don't. Owen is my name." In case that wasn't clear, I read it twice. Then I folded it back up and put it in my jacket pocket. I want to tell you that I felt rage. Maybe I should have. But what I actually felt was something cold and very focused. Like the temperature in the room had dropped 2 degrees and my body was recalibrating. Because everything will already be in motion is a very specific phrase. It's a legal phrase. It's the kind of language someone uses when they've been talking to lawyers. My phone had no signal, but the cabin had a landline. I found it in the kitchen, one of those old wall-mounted units, and I picked up the receiver and there was a dial tone, which felt like the first piece of genuine luck I'd had in 48 hours. I called my friend Troy. I knew his number by heart because we've been friends since 7th grade and I never deleted it from my mental memory even after smartphones made that unnecessary. And I told him where I was and what I'd found and asked him to call my attorney. I have an attorney because I'd hired one when Mom died, specifically to help navigate the estate paperwork. His name is Paul. He's in his 50s, drives a very boring sedan, and is exactly the kind of person you want on your side when something goes wrong. Troy called Paul. Paul called me back at the cabin landline 40 minutes later. "Don't sign anything," was the first thing he said. "Whatever they filed or sent or had delivered, don't touch it." "What did they file?" He paused. "Liam submitted a petition to the probate court yesterday afternoon, claiming you'd verbally agreed to relinquish your share of the property in exchange for a cash settlement. He submitted an affidavit. Owen, someone signed your name to a supporting document." I sat down. "That's forgery," I said. "Yes," Paul said. "It is. There's a specific kind of nausea that comes not from shock but from recognition. Because in that moment, pieces I hadn't known were pieces started assembling into a shape. The weekend trip that Liam planned. The wine that kept getting refilled without me asking. The way I'd slept so hard I hadn't heard them leave. And I'm a light sleeper, always have been. Carla's sister is a nurse. I didn't know if that was relevant yet. I was just cataloging. I told Paul about the note. I told him I still had it. "Don't lose that," he said immediately. "That's evidence." Troy drove up with 2 friends in a truck with 4-wheel drive. It took them almost 3 hours in the snow. When they pulled up to the cabin, I was sitting on the porch with my bag packed and the note zipped into the interior pocket of my jacket and my phone plugged into a portable charger I'd found in my bag. On the drive back, I didn't say much. I just watched the snow-covered fields go past the window and thought about the fishing story Liam had told by the fireplace. The way he'd laughed. The way it had felt real. The next 2 weeks were like living inside 2 separate realities simultaneously. On the surface, normal. I went to work. I answered emails. I made coffee in my apartment and watched the news and called my dad once, briefly, because I needed to hear a voice that wasn't connected to any of this. Even if it was a distant voice, even if the distance was mostly his fault. Underneath, Paul was building a case. The forged document was sloppy. That was the first piece of good news. Whoever had signed my name, and I had a strong suspicion it was Carla, based on nothing but the handwriting style on the note and the fact that Liam's hands shake slightly when he's nervous, always has since we were kids. Had done it quickly. The signature didn't match my actual signature on the estate documents filed 18 months prior. A forensic handwriting examiner Paul brought in confirmed it in less than an hour. The second piece of good news, Liam had emailed a cousin of ours about the plan. Not the details, he was careful about that. But he'd written something like the Owen situation is almost resolved 3 days before the cabin weekend. That email existed. The cousin, to her credit, forwarded it to me without hesitation when I explained what had happened. The third piece, I remembered something from that Friday morning before we left for the cabin. I'd used the guest bathroom upstairs to get ready, and there was a tote bag hanging on the back of the door. Carla's bag, the big canvas one she always carried. It had tipped slightly and some things had spilled. I'd stacked them back without looking closely, but standing in my kitchen 2 weeks later, I realized one of the things I'd set back in the bag was a prescription bottle. I hadn't read the label. I hadn't thought to. I told Paul. He told me it might matter depending on what we could prove about the circumstances of my sleep. I don't know definitively what was in my wine that night. I may never know. But I know that I'm a light sleeper who didn't hear 3 adults packing bags, loading a car, and leaving through a gravel driveway in the middle of the night. I know I woke up with a headache that I'd attributed to wine, but that felt different, deeper, behind my eyes. I know I slept from 11 p.m. to 7:40 in the morning, which is not something I do. My attorney filed a motion to dismiss the probate petition on the grounds of forgery. He also contacted the county's sheriff's department regarding the potential criminal elements, the forged document, the possible drugging. Liam's attorney apparently had not anticipated any of this moving quickly. I know because Liam called me. It was a Sunday night, 3 weeks after the cabin. I was eating dinner and my phone lit up with his name and I looked at it for a long time before I answered. Owen. His voice was different. Tight. I need to talk to you. Okay, I said. This is getting out of hand. Paul is making this into something it isn't. We need to sit down and Liam, I said. Someone signed my name on a legal document. Silence. We can talk about it. There's an explanation. There's a forensic handwriting analysis, I said. There's an email to cousin Sophie about the Owen situation. There's a note in Carla's handwriting telling me not to fight it. I kept my voice even. I was surprised how even it was. I kept the note, Liam. More silence. Longer this time. I didn't want it to go this way. He finally said, I know, I said. And I meant it, which was the worst part. I believed that he'd wanted some version of this that didn't feel quite so ugly to him. That he'd told himself a story where I was compensated, where it was fair, where he didn't have to think too hard about what they'd put in my drink. I love you, he said. It sounded true and hollow at the same time. I know that too, I said, and I hung up. The petition was dismissed 4 months later. The forensic analysis was submitted as evidence. The probate court ruled the forged affidavit invalid and reaffirmed the original terms of the will. The house split evenly, neither of us able to force a sale without the other's consent. The criminal matter is still working through the system as I'm recording this. There are charges being considered related to the document forgery. Whether they stick, I genuinely don't know. The drugging is harder to prove at this point. Too much time has passed, nothing in my system now. The prescription bottle I half remember could be explained a dozen ways, but Paul says the forgery alone is significant. He says they were reckless, and recklessness leaves traces. Carla and Liam are separated. I found out from my cousin 2 months ago, not from Liam directly. I don't know if they'll divorce, or if this is temporary, or if it matters to me one way or the other. What I do know is that the evening before I found out, the night before my cousin called, I'd spent an hour on the phone with Liam's daughter from his first marriage, Violet. She's 15, lives with her mom in Pittsburgh, and calls me sometimes because apparently I'm the uncle who always picks up. She was telling me about a school project and asking my advice, and for that 1 hour, I was just her uncle, just a person on the phone eating leftover Thai food and listening to a teenager explain the plot of her history presentation. That mattered more to me than any of the rest of it. I still own half a house in Parma that I don't live in. I'm not sure what I'll do with it yet. I'm not ready to sell, and I'm not ready to move back, and I'm not ready to decide what the house means to me now that the person who filled it is gone. Paul says there's no rush. I believe him. The note is still in a folder in my desk drawer. Carla's handwriting, my name on the outside. That line, don't fight it, Owen. It'll be easier if you don't. I look at it sometimes, not with anger, or not only with anger, mostly with something I don't have a clean word for, something that sounds like, you underestimated what you were dealing with, which is not a threat. It's just what happened. They thought they'd left me somewhere I couldn't get back from. They forgot that I've been finding my way back from things my whole life. It's kind of the whole story of growing up in that house, in that family, in that apartment with cereal for dinner and a mother who worked doubles and a brother I thought would always be there. You learn to navigate from nothing. You learn it early or you don't survive it. I survived. I've thought a lot about what actually went wrong for them. Not wrong morally. I mean tactically. Where they miscalculated. They planned for a version of me that didn't exist anymore. Maybe a version that had existed when we were younger. When I was the little brother who deferred, who kept the peace, who let things go because keeping the relationship felt more important than being right. Liam knew that person. He'd watched me be that person for most of our lives, and I think he, or more likely Carla, because the precision of it felt like her, built the whole plan around that assumption. What they didn't account for was that grief changes you. Losing my mom didn't make me softer. It made me quieter in a way that looks like softness from the outside but isn't. It made me pay attention differently. It made me understand that the things worth protecting are worth protecting seriously. Because people you love can be gone in 11 weeks, and what's left after that is what you actually built. So when I woke up in that cabin and found the note, I wasn't the person they planned for. I was someone who had already learned the hardest version of the lesson about what you lose when you don't act. There's something I keep coming back to, and it's this. What Liam and Carla did wasn't just wrong. It was lazy. Not lazy in effort. They clearly put thought into the timing, the trip, the document. Lazy in their understanding of consequences. They assumed the risk was manageable because they assumed I was manageable. They treated a person like a variable they'd already solved for. That's the part that I think unraveled them. Not my attorney, not the forensic analysis, not the email to my cousin. All of that was just downstream of the original error, which was deciding that they knew exactly what I would do. Intelligence without integrity doesn't hold. I've watched that play out enough times in enough ways to believe it. You can be strategic and organized and several steps ahead, and if the foundation of the whole thing is a willingness to hurt someone who trusted you, it will eventually collapse under its own weight. Not because the universe is watching and keeping score. I don't think it works like that, but because people who operate that way tend to keep operating that way, and eventually, the number of people who know what they're capable of reaches a critical mass. Carla and Liam didn't just lose a court case. They lost the version of themselves that could look people in the eye without calculation. I don't know what I would have been if I'd signed that document. Wealthier in the short term, maybe. Relieved of a complicated asset I don't quite know what to do with. But I know I would have known, every day after, that I'd let it happen. That when it mattered, I hadn't paid attention, hadn't kept the note, hadn't called Paul, hadn't sat with the discomfort of what was real long enough to respond to it clearly. My mom used to say that the quiet ones in a crisis are usually the ones who make it out. She meant it about herself. She was not a loud person, not dramatic, not prone to scenes. She just kept showing up and doing the next right thing with whatever she had. Cereal for dinner. Double shifts. A will written 18 months before anyone knew she needed one. I think about her every time I open that desk drawer. I didn't fight it the way Carla meant. I didn't scream or threaten or make it personal. I just paid attention, kept the evidence, trusted the right people, and let the truth do what truth does when you give it the right conditions. That's all it ever really takes. That's the whole thing.